I'm gonna be honest, I can't think of an opening to this video. I'm pretty sure this game drained me of my energy and summoned a demon in real life because there are apparently 4 main tasks to complete, and after completing just one of those, I was ready to clock out and call it quits. The Megami Tensei franchise is pretty good by all means, but they can't all be winners. Digital Devil's Story Megami Tensei is a novel by Aya Nishitani that went on to get 2 sequels, a successor series, and inspired a franchise as we know it today. In addition to this, there were also 2 games based directly off the novels using their characters. The most well-known one is made by Atlus, which not only got a sequel, but also uses the same basic gameplay that would later on be used in their own Shin Megami Tensei franchise. The other one was developed by Telenet and was a top-down dungeon crawler released on multiple different PCs, and strangely, I don't hear much about the game. It's not connected to the rest of the series in any way other than being based off the novel, and it isn't well received by the few people that I have seen talk about it, so I imagine it's probably not at the top of the list for newer fans to start playing. And with it being Japan only with no fan translation, I doubt most of the casual Western fans even know about it. Lucky for you all, I'm insane, and I've decided to waste my time giving it a go. So join me as I talk about Digital Devil's Story Megami Tensei by Telenet. Okay, so before you play the game itself, it's probably a good idea to get a look at the manual, because the game doesn't have an opening cutscene or anything of that nature. It just drops you in, which is fine, but it can leave you a bit confused. The manual contains all the information you'll need to get started. A summary letting you know the story so far, which is just a loose retelling of the first 2 novels, the important characters in the game, the various items you'll collect, and their uses, including a very basic weapon fusing system, where some items can be combined with some weapons for a special effect, like using the staff in conjunction with the Magatama can petrify enemies. Most importantly, it will explain the game's map, which is based off the Kabbalah. Each Sephiroth on the Kabbalah is an area in the game, and each area connects to each other in the same way that the Sephiroth do. Some of these paths connect to areas you can't normally reach by exploring the area itself, and some of them lead to dead ends, so it's a pretty creative map design. But as you can expect, this means that the game is very exploration heavy, and you're kind of navigating a labyrinth that you're tossed in, defeating enemies, and finding your way through. Unfortunately, as you can probably gather, navigating a huge map like that is a nightmare to keep track of, and the in-game map is not of much use. Many older games require players to make their own map, and this game is no exception. It tells you the basics about where you are, like on floor 2 of HOD, and if you know how to use the map on the map screen, you can see how many floors there are in a dungeon altogether. But it's an old school dungeon crawler that relies mainly on you making your own map and using hints gathered throughout the game to progress. And now with that out of the way, it's time to finally start the game. Starting off, they just drop you into the first Sephiroth, Malkuth. You also immediately have enemies gunning for you in this area, so it's best to start moving. Your sword has a short beam type of attack, similar to the first Zelda game, but with significantly less reach, and luckily these enemies aren't too strong, and you do have the ability to attack diagonally, so trapping them on corners is a valid strategy. The first thing we'll want to do is grab Nakajima's computer, because it's important for recognizing enemies as well as saving and accessing the map. So taking a left and exploring the side room will reward us with the computer, and as we can now see, every enemy in the game has a name that shows up in a log on the side of the screen, like the Flood Jerry, which I'm assuming is supposed to be Flood Jelly. To access the menu, you will either need a battery or to be at the end of a dungeon. Accessing the computer while in the dungeon will use the battery, but it's good for saving if you are some ways off from your next location, or if you made decent progress and don't want to lose it. You do have a limited time to use the battery after collecting it though, so don't hoard it if you wish to use it. And to access the map, you will need the map item, and you will need to be able to access the menu screen, either via the battery or from switching areas. The map is pretty useless. It just shows you what floor you're on and the general shape of the dungeon, which you can figure out on your own elsewhere, and after using the map, it's removed from your inventory, so I would save it for moments when you're really confused. Now, where do we go after this? Well, it's a linear path for now, so let's make our journey over Yesod, which is where the game truly opens up. Along the way, we'll encounter various different types of enemies, but don't let them get the best of you. Most of them do not handle corners very well, so as long as you play it smart and don't try to fight too many of them at one time, you can survive. Once in Yesod, we'll get a bit more of that non-linearity that was mentioned before. Yesod connects to Hod, Nedsack, and Tiferet, so it's up to us to figure out which one we should aim for first. Since there was a cutscene showing Loki try to turn Cerberus to stone, it's probably best that we try to find Cerberus first. So, exploring Yesod, we can encounter this shrine that, punching it, will display this image of a skeleton lady, who is Izanami. Izanami in this game appears as an undead zombie-like being when you contact her at her shrines, although she does become more humanoid the more that you talk to her, which I think is a nice little detail. Izanami lets us know the secret towards saving Cerberus is on the northeast of the 8th floor of Hod. So we have our goal and a location. Let's try to get to it. I journeyed through Yesod, trying to find my way to where I imagined would be the entrance to Hod. I took that path, and ended up in Nedsack. The enemies in Nedsack were too powerful for me at the moment, and it wasn't where I was supposed to be, so I went back to Yesod, and journeyed my way through the other exit into a room that had a branching path, and this time I ended up in Hod. I finally thought I was clear, and I just had to make it to floor 8. So I walked around Hod and made it all the way past the mini-boss that was unkillable for me at my current level, and brought some items from a merchant who is a very chill guy, to be honest. I mean, he doesn't do much, he just kind of exists. And then finally, I found Cerberus, trapped behind a wall. I can't reach him. Then I remembered that Izanami told me the key to rescuing Cerberus was in the northeast of floor 8, and I'm on floor 7. Continuing the path I'm on would have taken me to another area, this one with invisible enemies, or would have looped back around the way that I came. So how do I get to floor 8? Well, making my way back through Hod, past the mini-boss, past enemies, past everything I encountered, I found floor 2. Now, floor 2 has a hole in the floor, and that hole in the floor will send me to floor 8. There are 2 entrances to floor 8. This is the one that I need. Now, this area with the merchant that I mentioned earlier, he just randomly spawned somewhere on floor 8. So now I had to find something on the northeast of this floor. But I couldn't find anything. I was running around like an idiot until I passed through an invisible hole in the floor, which worked me from floor 8 to floor 7, and right inside the wall that Cerberus was in. And it was at this moment that I recognized this truly was a Megaten game, and an old school dungeon crawler, and I will probably need mental help after beating this game. Cerberus gets added to your inventory like an item, but he doesn't need an ammo bar like the other weapons. Instead, Cerberus works on a timer. You can summon him, but only for about a minute at most, and every moon cycle, 5 seconds are added to the summoning time. So the key to using Cerberus is to use him in bursts, to sprint around rooms or through hordes of enemies quickly, rather than to keep him summoned. I kinda explained it to some of my friends as calling him like a Devil Trigger or Rage Mode from modern games. Cerberus has infinite health, and he deals a lot of damage to standard enemies, but I haven't had him work on any mini-bosses, at least not to my knowledge. Cerberus can also break down locked doors, so you don't need to gather keys anymore. So overall, he is a very useful power-up, and I'm glad that we have him. And now that we've rescued him, we should try and get more hints from Izanami to try and beat Loki. Trying to find Izanami and Loki was not as easy as I expected, though. My health was fairly low, and some areas had far more aggressive enemies than others. I had no idea where I was going, and there were a lot of areas in the game to go to, so naturally I fall back on the old RPG game changer, grinding. The game has a leveling system, but it only increases your attack power. Your health is instead given from collecting Philosopher's Stones that are dropped by powerful mini-bosses throughout the maps. Most of them are simply stronger enemies, like this red guy, that's just a stronger version of the blue guys found throughout the game. There was one I found I needed to drop a wallet on the ground in order to defeat, although I'm not quite sure why. Izanami did later on give me a hint about him, but since he was already dead by this point, I don't really think it matters. So, thank you, Izanami. Very cool. I kept trying to grind until I figured out what to do, and I kept warping to areas that I probably wasn't supposed to be in yet. Cutscenes showing things that either already happened, or events from Izanami that were so obscure I didn't grasp what she was saying, and overall, stuff that's pretty par for the course for bad older RPGs. I did eventually find my way to a walkway I couldn't pass through, though. It just blocked my progress. This was until I turned into Cerberus and I was allowed to pass, even giving a cutscene along with it. After loading in, I was in an icy area, with the music from the movie that plays when you die, which is kind of fitting for where this is. This is the Ott, and for the purpose of the game, it is where you can travel between the light and dark variants of the Kabbalah. Yeah, each Sephiroth has both a light and dark variant, and I've traveled between them before, although only temporary and for a room or two. The Ott is where they truly fuse and become one, and to me, getting somewhere like this felt like a big deal, and I figured I must be near the end, or at least near the end point. Before we head through Da'at and make our way to the alternate world, we have some final tasks to make up for in the world of light. There were some more Izanami shrines that needed touching up, and although none of them gave any useful advice, I did fight some more mini-bosses along the way to increase my health a bit further and collected some items such as a gem and a boot. Along the way I discovered something kind of game-breaking. If you save the game and then either shut it off or reset it, when you load back up, your health is automatically full. This kind of became a game-breaking strategy for me going forwards because there were some types of enemies that just rushed you, and especially when fighting more than one at a time, your health can go down very quickly. Finally, after restoring Izanami to her full strength, I received one final hint, letting me know about Nakajima's teacher, Miss Ohara, for whom I saw screenshots of several times in the game. For anyone who isn't in the know, Ohara was Nakajima's teacher who ended up becoming a servant of Loki and serves as an antagonistic character within the novel. With our new goal of stopping Ohara, I made my way to the Ott and I'm finally ready to journey to the alt world. Da'at is a dangerous place. The enemies here are fast, aggressive, and there are a lot of them. The game does give you bones to feed Cerberus to keep him summoned, but it's still dangerous to keep him active full time. Carefully knowing when to summon and when to stalk Cerberus, we make our way to the bottom reaches of Da'at. After exiting, we get a cutscene showing Yumiko, who looks totally terrifying by the way, letting us know that she will be communicating from dolls by this point moving forward. We wind up in Tifreth. Again, except this time, it clearly looks different and we can see a bunch of humanoid enemies moving around. The game calls them Devila, but they use the sprite Miss Ohara, so I'm assuming it's their way of confusing us and not knowing the real one, especially because in the next room over, the Devila look drastically different. The real Ohara is locked behind this door, but because we just left the Ott and Cerberus is weak, I don't want to break it down, and especially since enemies here are still fairly powerful. If regular enemies are giving me trouble, then it's no doubt that boss will probably kill me. Ohara also has the ability to stop me from moving, which requires me to equip the boots to move. So, I make my way from Tifreth to Gabora, where we meet our first Yumiko doll, who lets us know that there is an even stronger force than Loki lurking in the background before having her transmission cut off. I journeyed back and defeated the boss who dropped a bottle of mercury sulfide on the floor that I accidentally picked up too quickly to get footage of, but it's here in my inventory screen, so I know I have it for later. With my level slightly increased and a bottle of mercury sulfide in hand, we make our way back to Ohara, stopping by this merchant on the way to pick up whatever we might need. Once we made it to Ohara, I used the mercury sulfide and she came to her senses and stopped attacking me, just for the game to crash. I don't know if I did something wrong or if the game decided to just quit, but either way it was time for me to try again. By this point in the game I was making my own guide to give me some direction on what to do since otherwise I'll be lost without any cause and I was near the end of my chain, so I figured I need to be worth the second try. I decided to try it several more times, each time with the same result. A black screen, but the background music and sound effects still playing, until I died. Except for one time that I apparently killed Ohara within the black screen, but then I was, still stuck in the black screen. I tried several different methods of escaping and only one worked, but when I re-entered the area, Ohara was still evil. I figured maybe if I kill Loki first and then cure her. And nope, same situation, just dying in the void. So I said screw it, let's just go ahead and kill Ohara. The time for peace is oval, throw some Magatama in her face and beat her to death so we can go after Loki. Arriving in the same room as Loki, we can fight off some smaller enemies nearby before starting the fight. Just like many other enemies in the game, he isn't too difficult. He deals a lot of damage, but just beat him with some Magatama like every other boss, and he'll go down, dropping a key. With Loki defeated and a key obtained, it's best to finish what we came here to do. Rescue Yumiko and save the world. The Journey Through the Dark World variant of Yasad is dangerous. The Devil are everywhere, and while I do deal a large amount of damage with my current level, and especially when using sub-weapons like the Shuriken or Magatama, it doesn't make their fireballs or attacks hurt any less. It's a good thing I went back to fight the optional bosses earlier, because with the extra health, I never would have made it out of here. Midway through Yasad, I found a Yumiko doll that just didn't do anything. At first, maybe I thought I did something wrong, so I went back to another room and came back, and when I tried it again, the same thing. The doll just didn't work. Just like with Ohara, I'm not sure if this is an issue with the emulator or if it's something with the game itself, and in all honesty, there's also a chance that this is intended to not work right now, which is entirely possible. Either way, I ignored it and made my way through Yasad, back to my good pal Hod. Nothing special really happened in Hod except I found a boss named Devil Squash, and found 3 Yumiko dolls right next to each other. Otherwise, it was an extremely basic experience, and the same can be said for the majority of the bosses up until I made my way to Keither. Just make progress through the labyrinth, beating any bosses you see and picking up their items just in case they're useful, and eventually we'll make our way to the big man himself, Set. Set lives within the alternate world Keither, and he has no problem taunting us and letting us know our end is near. Unfortunately for him, I have a pocket full of Magatama, and I'm not afraid to use it. Unlike most other areas, Keither is a mostly linear path. There are a few branches here and there, but it's mainly just a maze with one entrance and one exit. We fire our way through the dungeon, which is surprisingly difficult even with the Shuriken and Magatama. Use Cerberus to take down hordes, and use either Magatama or Shuriken to take down solo enemies so that you can clear out rooms while hopefully keeping your health stable. There is a battery along the way, so don't be afraid to use it and save at the midway point. Along the way you'll even see Yumiko, held captive within this wall, just like how Cerberus was back in the Light World. And just like with Cerberus, we need to find a way in, and I'm sure that Set's blocking the path. Grinding our way to Set, we eventually catch up to him, locked behind this door. Break it down and start wailing on him. He has a lot of health, more than any boss we've encountered so far, to the point that I trapped him on the corner and just wailed on it with Magatama, and it took almost my entire inventory, plus some shuriken, before he eventually died. Pick up the health upgrade, and we can finally rescue Yumiko. Our only task now is to escape, so we journey back into Da'at one last time. We take the quest back from Da'at all the way to Bina, then from Bina to Keither, and we see Yomotsu Shikome waiting for us in the distance. The journey through Keither was not as hard as I imagined, except for being randomly jumped by this big guy who I'm not really sure if I was supposed to kill or not, but I just ran past him. Making it to the final area and fighting my way past some smaller mobs, we find Yomotsu Shikome, who apparently doesn't want to fight and just leaves us alone. Apparently this is because I rescued Yumiko, which leads to the true ending of the game, as opposed to if I tried to leave without properly completing the game, where Yumiko will remain a crystal. And now we can sit back and watch the credits roll. This has been Digital Devil Story Megami Tensei by Telenet. Now, would I recommend this game to anyone? No, I wouldn't. The game isn't offensively bad or even close to the worst thing I've played by any means, but it's just not good. When it comes to top-down RPGs with real-time combat, I would easily recommend Ys, Zelda, or Highlight over this. And even if we exclusively mean dungeon-crawling games in this specific style, Gauntlet and Dandy both exist by this point in time, and both of those had something going for it. They both had multiplayer, and in Gauntlet's case, we even had a higher weapon and enemy variety. This isn't to say that there's nothing good about the game by any means, but none of them are particularly interesting by any means. The narrative is basically non-existent, which isn't a sin on its own, but compared to other games in the Megami Tensei franchise, or even the novels that the game is based off of, it's hard to really recommend it for that reason. The weapon fusing system is a neat concept, but the Salamander fusion was completely useless and the Romola staff was only useful in a handful of situations. Most of the enemies in the game are just more powerful reskins of existing enemies, which means once you learn the strategy for those 3 enemies, You can clear out rooms easily, with the exception being the hordes and the bosses. But you can clear hordes in seconds with Cerberus and bosses with Magatama, so there's no real reason to go looking for keys, because Cerberus can just break down doors. Most enemies get caught in corners, and while there might be two different endings, I can't justify myself going back to replay it for the other one just to see what's different. Again, it's not the worst game I've ever played. Not by a long shot. It never infuriated me or anything. It's just painfully average. Maybe at the time it was seen differently, who knows. But I wouldn't recommend the game to anyone that isn't a fan of Megaten, and even then, there are far better games in the series I would recommend instead. I do want to clarify that there are several different versions of this game made, and while they all have the same basic gameplay, there were minor differences between them all. So maybe, in the MSX version, the salamander was actually useful, or maybe the shop had a different inventory depending on where you were. If you like retro games, and you wanted to play this game for some reason, then don't let me stop you. But especially now, 36 years later, I don't see a reason to come back to it out of blind curiosity. And I know that I will probably never play it again, at least. So, if you like this video, please feel free to like and subscribe and come back for next time. If not, also feel free to like and subscribe and come back for next time. I crave the attention. You know, I went out and I played this. And yeah, it's an experience, and I'll probably forget it within a month. Have a good one, everyone, and I'll see you next time.